Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to talk about all the books I read in the month of December. So I already did a wrap up halfway through the month, which I'll leave linked for you. I'm not gonna go into those books into detail. I'm just gonna tell you which books they are and their star rating. If you want to know more in-depth thoughts, definitely check that video out. For now, I'm gonna start with my stats and then I'm gonna move on to the actual reviews. So I read 16 books in the month of December, which equates to 4,855 pages. I had 1 2-star, 2 3-stars, 9 4-stars, and 4 5-stars. I read 2 young adult books and 14 adult books. As far as the genres were concerned, I read 1 Why Choose romance, 2 contemporary romances, 8 holiday romances, and 2 fantasy romances or romantices. And then I read 3 not romances. 2 of those were contemporary and 1 was a fantasy. The formats in which I read these books, I read 1 manga, 8 novellas, which most of those were the holiday romances, 1 fan fiction, and 6 regular novels. As far as my goals are concerned, I'm gonna skip this section. I'm gonna have an entire video dedicated all to my goals and whether or not I completed them, which I didn't. But I'm gonna just mention all that and what I'm gonna do for next year. So yeah, like I said, I had 16 books that I read this month and 11 of which I already talked about in my mid-month wrap-up. So a lot of them I already talked about. So I read 1 book that I gave 2 stars and I talked about that one in my mid-month wrap-up, but it's called "'Tis the Season for Revenge." I had 2 3-star reads. Both of them I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, and they were Ho 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 and Mother's Day In. I had 9 4-star reads, 7 of which I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, and they were Pucking Around, The Heart Principle, Christmas on the 13th Floor, Christmas in Chestnut Springs, When She Was Naughty, Trick Shot, and Part of Your World. The 2 4-star reads that I have not talked about are Wrapped Up in You by Talia Hibbert. So this is another holiday romance. It was the last one I read, which actually I did a holiday romance vlog or Christmas romance vlog, considering all the books I read for that vlog were all Christmassy, which I'll leave linked for you. This is a holiday novella following 2 best friends. So this takes place in the UK and the guy is like a Luke Evans type character. So he's very attractive and he's a very big movie star, like a superhero movie star. But he has been having a crush on his best friend for a while now. And she used to be married, now she's divorced, and she's been divorced for 2 years. So he feels like now is his time to shoot his shot, so he does. And it turns out that she has been having a crush on him, or she's been loving him, or having this unrequited love for him for years. It's their romance. This was very cute. I really love Talia Hibbert. I think she's very funny, and this book was again very funny. I do have to say the reason this was a 4 out of 5 is, you guys know, I really want my couple to be together and I want to see them happy for a little bit. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be like for half of the book, but at least for like at the end, I want like scenes of them actually doing coupley things and being together. And this just was not that. It was like almost like the last, I think it was in the last chapter that they finally confessed their feelings and they finally decided that they're gonna make it work. And then in the epilogue, obviously we saw them together. I know this is a holiday romance, but still, I mean, we didn't even have them kissing until like, I think the last chapter. And that to me is just not enough. I want a little bit more. I'm not saying like this is like they didn't even have sex until the epilogue, which is fine, but at least have them kissing for, I don't know, I just like that. That is why I read romance. I mean, I get the angst and I get like the longing and I want that. I'm not saying that I want a book entirely of a couple actually being together, because that obviously, that's not an interesting story, but at least give me something. So yeah, that is the reason why this was a 4 out of 5. And then the last 4, I was debating because after I finished it, I actually gave it a 5. But now that a couple days have passed, I realized that it's actually a 4. And it's King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. So this is the first book in her King of Scars duology. And as Meg with books would say, it's actually book 4 in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which she's 100% right about. This, even though this is supposed to be like a mix between the Six of Crows duology and the Shadow and Bone trilogy, it's really just like the next book in the Shadow and Bone series. Because yes, even though Nina, basically I cannot really tell you a lot about it. I'm actually gonna do an entire non-spoiler vlog about this duology, but you follow Nina from the Six of Crows duology and you follow Nikolai and Zoya from the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and basically they deal with events that happened after those two series. Pretty much see every single one of the Shadow and Bone series characters in this one, whereas you don't see any character apart from Nina from the Six of Crows duology. That's why, and it takes place in Ravka, so yeah, it definitely feels like a continuation of the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I did enjoy it. I loved seeing Nikolai. Nikolai is one of my favorite characters, and my expectations for this were very, very low. So that's why I was pleasantly surprised in the end. I figured I really like it. I just heard so many mixed things about it. I just assumed that I was not gonna love it. Like I said, in the end, it was 4 stars because it's pretty forgettable. And was it necessary? Not really, in my opinion. And if you look at like the amount of pages spent and what actually happened, it's not really a lot. And this actually takes place in 2 places because Nina's story actually takes place in Fjerda because she needs to do something because of events that happened in Six of Crows. So I'll be like, I do have to say, you cannot read this without having read the entire Shadow and Bone trilogy and the entire Six of Crows duology. Otherwise, you will get majorly spoiled. And especially with the Six of Crows stuff, you do not want to get spoiled for that. I do have some criticism, mainly about Nina's character, which once again, I cannot really get into without spoiling Six of Crows, which or Cricket Kingdom, which I definitely don't want to do that. If you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, definitely wait for that vlog because I still need to read Rule of Wolves. But once I read that one, I'll upload that vlog. I do have to say, I think Leigh Bardugo is an amazing author. I marked up so many of her quotes. I think she just writes beautifully, and I really love her world that she creates. I know it's pretty obviously very much based on our world, but I just like what she does with it. I did love being back in this world. I would say if you're a major fan, I mean, I still have not read Rule of Wolves yet, so I cannot make a definitive judgment, but I would have to say if you're a big fan of the Grisha universe like I am, then you're probably gonna like this. But if it was just so-so, and especially if you only love the Six of Crows duology and didn't really care for the Shadow and Bone trilogy, then I don't think you're gonna love this. Unless you really, really love Nikolai the way I do, then you might really enjoy this. But yeah. And now for the 5-star read. So I had 4 5-star reads, and one of them I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up. So I do have to say, most of the books I really loved, I read in the last half of the month. So the one I already talked about was Spy Family Volume 10. I gave this 5 stars. I already talked about it in my mid-month wrap-up. Next 5-star I read was A Festive Feud by Maren Moore. So this is another holiday romance, and this was my favorite holiday romance. I really, really enjoyed this. You follow 2 characters, and they are from rivaling families in this town. So years ago, when his family moved to the town, her family did not invite them to their annual Christmas party, and ever since then they've had rivaling Christmas parties, and now it has moved on to the next generation, so their generation, and they have this confrontation at this store where they break a bunch of stuff. So they get put in a cell together, and then the mayor tells them that he's sick of their shit and sick of their families feuding, so now they cannot have 2 Christmas parties. They have to have one together, so that forces them into a forced proximity situation. Both of them have to make sure that this party happens. So while doing that, they get closer, they get to know each other, they get through their biases, and they fall in love. And I really, really enjoyed this. This was so festive to me. This was like the perfect holiday romance. It was just long enough. It was not too long, but a little bit longer than most. It was around 200 pages, and I felt like that was perfect. It was clear that they knew each other, so she didn't have to build up their relationship too much because this is like an enemies to lovers situation. It was clear they were attracted to each other, but they never pursued it because of their family feuding. And then when they're together, sparks fly, and it was just so good. I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading this. I would highly recommend it. Like I said, it was my favorite holiday romance that I read this year. It was also a little bit smutty too, and the smut scenes were done perfectly. So yeah, definitely enjoyed my time, and I would highly recommend this one. My next 5-star was actually a reread, and it was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. So I reread this one to read House of Sky and Breath, which I have not read yet, so that once I read both of those, I'm ready to read House of Flame and Shadow. This one I've never reread. This was the first time I reread it, and I did definitely enjoy my time reading it. This time I could knowing what was going to happen, I could see the clues that were laid, because this is not only a fantasy romance, it's also a mystery, because you follow Bryce and the first, I think, 125 pages are just of her living her life with her best friend. And then after that, her friend actually gets murdered. So her friend was a werewolf and she, along with her entire pack, get murdered. They arrest somebody for it and Bryce thinks that everything is clear, but she's not the same person that she was before her friend died. But that now the murders have started up again, and now the Archangel. So this is a urban fantasy, a true urban fantasy, meaning it is set in a fantasy setting, but there are like modern day technologies woven in there. The Archangel, who rules Crescent City, forces her to work alongside one of his officers, a fallen angel named Hunt, to see who actually killed Danica, her best friend, because obviously it wasn't the person that they arrested. So Hunt and Bryce have to work together. Bryce portrays herself as this vapid party girl, and Hunt believes that until he gets to know her and realizes there's more to her than meets the eye. There's also my favorite character, Rune, who is her brother, who's a fae, and I love him. I love him so much. We didn't get to see enough of him, and I thought Bryce was being so mean to him. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of him in House of Sky and Breath. And yeah, this sets up a pretty sure like a revolution type story, because the reason Hunt was a fallen angel is because he rebelled 200 years ago, and ever since then he's been a slave. But events from this book kind of give him and Bryce the opportunity, I think, to do more. Like I said, I'm just saying this, I've not read House of Sky and Breath yet, but I did read like the first chapter, and the way that already was set up makes me think that this is gonna end up in like a revolution type story, which I'm very much excited about. And I really enjoyed this the second time around. I give it 5 stars. I would highly recommend this series. I do have to say, if you've not read this book yet, the beginning is very, very slow. Like, it takes a while to really get into it, but once you're into it, you're very much into it, because Sarah J. Maas, say what you want about her, she's one of my favorite authors. So I mean, I know a lot of people criticize her. I'm not one of them, but she is a very engaging author. Like, that is what makes the first part that much slower, because I know that she can hook you and you can like fly through her books. Because once the action gets going, her books are compulsively readable. So yeah, very much enjoyed my time. And last but most certainly not least, my favorite book I read this month was Manacled by Senlin Yu. So this is a fan fiction. You can find this on AO3. I'll leave it linked for you. This is bound. You cannot actually pay to have books bound. You can only pay for like the materials used for somebody else to bind it, or you can bind it yourself, obviously, but I cannot do that, so I paid for the materials. This is a fan fiction. It's a Hermione fan fiction, so Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter. I'm sure all of you already know what this is about, because it's been pretty hyped on BookTube this year and last year. I did an entire spoiler-filled vlog for this one, which I'll leave linked for you. If you've read this, definitely check it out, because I really enjoyed filming that one. So this is a fan fiction, like I said. You follow events after the 5th book, but the 5th book has already been changed. In this story, Draco killed Dumbledore in the 5th year. Because of that, Voldemort ultimately wins the war. The rebellion and the Order of the Phoenix are wiped out. This is basically a Harry Potter / Handmaid's Tale retelling, because all the pureblood families cannot have children anymore. So Voldemort forces Muggleborns to become handmaidens, basically. He gives them to these purebloods for the men to rape them, essentially, and hopefully they'll get pregnant, and hopefully that will ensure that the wizarding lines will continue. So Hermione gets given to Draco, and yeah. So this is told in 3 parts. First part is the present, second part are all flashbacks, and then you return to the present. This is a Hermione love story, which means there is a love story. They do fall in love. I'm not going to tell you when or how, but this was heartbreakingly beautiful, in my opinion. Some of the lines that Senlin Yu wrote will live in my mind rent-free. In fact, I read this book and I cannot stop thinking about it. I do have to say, just like with Crescent City, in my opinion, the first part, so the first like present part, is very slow, because I started this book actually in October. I do have to say, it was not a high priority for me, because I was reading a lot of other things. In November was obviously the Goodreads Choice Award video that I did. I wasn't making an effort to really read this, but the first part definitely did not compel me, because if I really love a book, I would have read it regardless of what else I was reading at the time. But once I started with the flashbacks, I could not stop reading this. I fell in love with this book. Draco was already an interesting character for me. I've read Draymini fan fiction this year, and he's always been intriguing to me. But I used to read Draymini when I was like 13 or 14, and I just think Draco and Hermione are such an interesting couple. Obviously, it's for enemies to lovers. It's just such a great dynamic, and I've always thought that. But this one was a masterpiece in my opinion. It's a shame that this cannot be published, because obviously you cannot publish fan fiction, because this is better than a lot of other books I read in my life. So yeah, I would highly recommend it. Even if you've never read Harry Potter, I would still recommend it. But if you did, heartbreakingly beautiful is the perfect way to describe this, because this will make you cry, but it will also, there are moments that are just so beautiful. So yeah, those were all the books that I read in the month of December. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were. Also, I would really love to know what was your favorite book that you read this month. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did. And thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.